Last but not least, born in San Rafael, California, a graduate of the University of Minnesota College of Liberal Arts, Thomas Cox moved to New York in 1977 to work in the field of fine arts. Mr. Cox works today as a self-employed artist, an advocate for Palestinian human rights. He is a member of Brooklyn for Peace and the Park Slope Food Co-op members for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. In January 2014, he organized a Brooklyn for Peace rally, co-sponsored by 20 other New York peace and human rights groups, to protest the frequent closings by the Egyptian government of the Rafah crossing, a vital lifeline for the people of Gaza.
I thank those at JVP New York who organized this event, and I thank all of you for being here in spite of the tiresome weather. And thank you, Hannah and Sarah, for your wonderful talks. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. That's a quote by Nelson Mandela, South African president, and surely that must be part of our guiding spirit, or we will lose our way. I hope that spirit will be reflected in what I say tonight and in what I do from this day forward. Despite an international arms embargo then in effect, Israel supplied weapons to apartheid-era South Africa, weapons used against the indigenous population seeking justice and freedom. In 2010, The Guardian provided documentary evidence that Israel even offered to sell some of its illegally acquired nuclear weapons to the South African racist regime. Here's a quote from Holocaust survivor Lillian Rosengarten, the only American on the Jewish boat to Gaza, deported by Israel for her courageous act, never to be allowed back. I too am a refugee from Nazi Germany, and I am a Jew who must say no to apartheid, occupation, checkpoints, stolen land, racism, and a desire for a Jewish state only obtained through the suffering and blood of Palestinians. Our movement is not advocating for our own ethnicities above others. We want equal rights and justice for the others, for ourselves, for everyone. Our movement includes Jews and non-Jews from across every spectrum. This evening I intend to speak on 4 topics: the history of the food co-op and of our co-op BDS group, what we learned after the crucial vote 3 years ago, the challenges we're facing today, and our upcoming effort to rid the co-op shelves of SodaStream products. The Cooperative Food Organization, of which we are members, is the largest consumer-owned single-store co-op by sales in the U.S. First opened in 1973, today we have around 16,000 members. Because of the high-quality food and the commitment to social justice, many of us are passionate food co-op advocates. The co-op is a political place. In our first year, we joined the boycott against South Africa to end apartheid, more than a decade before the cause gained popularity in the U.S. We have a significant history of using boycotts to address social injustice. We supported the United Farm Workers, joined in solidarity with LGBT communities in Colorado, and fought against Nestle when it was promoting infant formula over breastfeeding. In January 2009, before I joined the food co-op, one member, Hima B., brought up the idea of boycotting Israeli products during a general meeting, the co-op's decision-making venue. A group of concerned co-op members started what became Park Slope Food Co-op, Members for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. Here are words from the food co-op mission statement. We seek to avoid products that depend on the exploitation of others. We are committed to diversity and equality. We oppose discrimination in any form. An obvious venue to advocate for Palestinian rights, wouldn't you agree? But of course, we face the same difficulties at the co-op that are faced at virtually every public institution in this nation. The co-op has members who evidently believe that they must always defend Israel, no matter what the issue, as evidenced by the letters they send to the food co-op newspaper, the Line Waiters Gazette. In February 2011, our BDS group submitted a proposal for a co-op-wide referendum on whether the co-op should participate in the global nonviolent BDS movement against Israel's violations of international law and human rights. In 2011 and 2012, we also took actions including public discussions and the screening of films. But it was the effort to rid the co-op of all Israeli goods that garnered the most attention and the greatest opposition. Many politicians, including supposedly progressive ones, such as Brad Lander and Letitia James, made statements against our campaign and called it anti-Semitic. We were suspicious of the origin of these statements, but were not certain until later that they were linked to a highly organized opposition from outside the food co-op. We did, however, receive statements of support written and or signed by 24 local and internationally prominent individuals and organizations, including Alice Walker, Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, Boycott from Within, Jewish Voice for Peace, Brooklyn for Peace, Code Pink, and the U.S. Campaign to End the Israeli Occupation. Just 5 days before the big vote, one of the co-op's general coordinators published an article in the Gazette in which he strongly objected to boycotting Sabra products because they are manufactured in the U.S. He was dismissive or ignorant of the fact that Sabra and its parent Strauss, a prominent Israeli corporation, support the Golani and Givati brigades under Strauss's Adopt a Warrior program, brigades that have well-documented human rights abuses against Palestinians. Our proposal was discussed at the July 2011 general meeting. Then in March 2012, the big vote took place. Held at Brooklyn Tech to accommodate around 2,000 people, media coverage was extensive. The final vote was 1,005 against a BDS referendum and 653 for. This was not a vote on whether to boycott Israeli products. It was a vote on whether to allow a co-op-wide referendum where every member could cast a ballot on the issue of the co-op participating in a boycott of Israeli products. Although we lost the vote count, many of us regard it as an astounding victory, considering that we got virtually 40% of the vote, despite the small size, casual character, and lack of funding of our group, and the highly organized and well-funded nature of our opposition. After the big vote, one of our members, Fan Nguyen, who's here tonight, did some extremely thorough investigative journalism and published his findings in mondoweiss.com on February 12, 2013. I'm drawing on that research here. As we suspected, we were not simply up against opposing members of the co-op. We were the targets of a very sophisticated campaign to discredit us and to protect Israel at all costs. This highly organized campaign was waged by the IAN, the Israel Action Network. It enlisted city officials and had at its disposal millions of dollars. The IAN is, in its own words, a strategic initiative of the Jewish Federations of North America in partnership with the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, created to counter assaults made on Israel's legitimacy. The Jewish Federations of North America claims to be a 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. As of June 30th, 2012, it had more than $426 million in assets. The IAN began with an infusion of $6 million. The IAN claims as its difficult task the job of defining and confronting delegitimization, which at bottom is an effort to isolate Israel from the family of nations. The three organizations just mentioned partner with each other and partner with a fourth organization, the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, or JCRC-NY, the group I will now be focusing on. In a January 2013 report entitled IAN Facts 2, Best Practices for Countering the Assault on Israel's Legitimacy, available from IsraelActionNetwork.org, the first of 14 case studies is entitled Defeating the Boycott at the Park Slope Food Co-op. It is authored by Hindi Pupko and Noam Gilboard of the JCRC-NY. This is the same JCRC that has been in the news again in the last few weeks for another of its periodic all-expense-paid trips to Israel for a group of NYC council members. The website voicesagainstbds.com, which we now know was created by JCRC New York in the weeks before our big vote, lists anti-BDS and anti-referendum statements taken by JCRC from New York politicians, Senator Charles Schumer, Congressmember Yvette Clarke, Congressmember Gerald Nadler, New York State Assembly Member James Brennan, Public Advocate Bill de Blasio, 3 New York City Council members, and Brooklyn Borough President Marty Markowitz. Most of these statements were virtually identical, leading us to believe that they all came from the same source, JCRC. In addition, City Council Speaker Quinn called the boycott proposal ill-conceived, and Mayor Bloomberg expressed criticism of our campaign to New York Times reporters, saying, "The issue is there are people who want Israel to be torn apart and everybody to be massacred." In the months leading up to the big vote at the food co-op, JCRC New York created another group, the Coalition of Brownstone Brooklyn Rabbis, which they say was formed to present a local face to the campaign against BDS. This group, guided by JCRC New York, developed a campaign with messaging intended to resonate with the local community. A week before our big vote, the JCRC also organized a panel discussion entitled Progressive Voices Against BDS, featuring speakers from the supposedly progressive anti-BDS organizations J Street, the New Israel Fund, and Americans for Peace Now. Their statements and those of the New York politicians can be seen on the Voices Against BDS website. So curiously, the decidedly unprogressive organization JCRC, whose policies follow AIPAC, organized an event dubbed Progressive Voices Against BDS. The authors of Defeating the Boycott at the Park Slope Food Co-op explain their effort to drive a wedge between progressive values and the BDS movement. As clarified in the Mondoweiss article by Fan Nguyen, the JCRC used these progressive organizations, and these organizations allowed themselves to be used as wedges to strengthen the power of the non-progressive forces. The JCRC and its Vice President and CEO, Michael Miller, have been very successful in insinuating themselves into the fabric of New York City politics. The free trips to Israel offered to New York City Council members, U.S. congressmen and women, and other officials have certainly ingratiated Miller with these politicians. In February 2011, when the NYPD and Commissioner Ray Kelly came under criticism for spying on Muslim groups, restaurants, mosques, and institutions, JCRC supported the NYPD, and JCRC's leadership wrote an opinion editorial in the Jewish Week praising Kelly. This evidently served the double objective of bringing the JCRC closer to the police and further marginalizing Muslims, a community generally supportive of Palestinian human rights. With this sort of groundwork in place, when issues arise where there's potential for criticism of Israel, the JCRC is quickly able to garner pro-Israel statements from national and local officials. On November 20th, 2012, during Israel's Operation Pillar of Cloud attack on Gaza, the JCRC organized a support rally across from the Israeli consulate in New York. At least 9 elected officials lined up to be counted. At the rally, Michael Miller explained, "The purpose of this gathering is to express the unequivocal support for the State of Israel among New York's political, communal, ethnic, and faith leaders." In June of 2012, after the big vote, we faced another challenge. Co-op staff canceled a program our BDS group had planned, Zionist pinkwashing at home and abroad, on the grounds that it would criticize another community organization, the LGBT Center in Manhattan. Pinkwashing, I'm sure you know, is the term used for Israel's attempt to portray itself as a gay-friendly oasis and divert attention away from its oppression of the Palestinians. Our BDS group's disagreement with the LGBT Center had to do with their policy at the time, since revoked, prohibiting groups critical of Israel from holding events at the center. In recent years, we have written many letters to the Line Waiters Gazette, so many, in fact, that a special BDS section has been established to include them, along with many letters from the opposition. We've passed out informative flyers in front of the co-op on subjects including SodaStream and Ben & Jerry's ice cream, which is sold in illegal Israeli settlements by a company claiming to be socially responsible. Being dramatically outfunded is a major challenge. So far, we're also out-organized. We are at an extreme disadvantage when it comes to access to and influence on elected officials. But we are a true growing grassroots movement, as opposed to the top-down JCRC organized groups we are up against. The awareness of actual human rights abuses in Palestine is growing, especially among Europeans, younger Americans, and Jews, groups increasingly willing to speak truth to power. With recent efforts such as the Solidarity demonstration in Nazareth, Ferguson to Palestine, links are being made across the world between oppressed people standing up to those wielding power over them. We will continue to join in the larger causes of human rights, freedom, and justice from where our strength and power come. We need to make further inroads into communities like the Brownstone rabbis and their congregations, who might believe in equality and human rights, but hold contrary views when it comes to Israel. What has been termed Israeli exceptionalism, the bankrupt ideology that the universally recognized right of refugees to return to their homes somehow does not apply in the singular case of Israel. Many of us can speak from personal experience. I've gone through checkpoints with Palestinians traveling from Ramallah to Nablus. I've seen the enormous boulders dumped on roads to prevent Palestinians access to their lands. I've witnessed the devastation to once vibrant Hebron, where Israel is creating an economic blockade in an attempt to drive out Palestinians, and where Israeli settlers, having confiscated higher elevation Palestinian homes, dumped their garbage and filth down on top of the Palestinians below. I've also traveled from Jericho to the Dead Sea and seen how the West Bank beaches have been cleansed of Palestinians. We must keep our focus and not allow ourselves to be diverted by attempts to shift the topic to Hamas or China or Iran or to the so-called Islamic terrorism. We must be very careful with our language, insisting on our commitment to human rights for all and affirming ourselves as friends of the people of Israel. The oppressive Israeli policies are not serving Israel's interests. They benefit only a few greedy oligarchs. They are actually detrimental to the Israeli people and to all peace-loving people, and they cannot last. We must help keep Israel from self-destructing and bringing its neighbors down with it. In our newest effort, we have proposed that the co-op stop selling SodaStream products, whose main production facility has been in the West Bank on land stolen from a Palestinian village. We hope to be discussing this soon at a general meeting. Please see the Park Slope Food Co-op BDS website for details. Although the objective of this proposal is far more limited than our earlier proposal, and the case easier to argue, a boycott against one particularly egregious target, we expect that opposition will be just as fierce as in the previous campaign. BDS has struck a sensitive nerve for Israelis invested in the status quo, and Israel's defenders are surely ready. Our campaign will include informative events, leafleting, and printed literature. AdallahNY.org already has a great SodaStream fact sheet. Human life, all life, is miraculous, mysterious, precious. We owe it to the children of Palestine and Israel, to the oppressed, to future generations, to ourselves, to join in the creation of something much, much better than the dismal status quo. Until 2008, Nobel Prize winner and former South African President Nelson Mandela was still on the U.S. terrorism watch list. He told us, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." I want to thank and congratulate Jewish Voice for Peace on its recent deeper commitment to BDS entitled Statement on Boycott, Divestments, and Sanctions 2015 that includes these words. Today, the idea that there is a clear economic, political, or social separation between Israel and the occupation has been widely discredited. If you're a member of the Park Slope Food Co-op, please join our BDS group. And whether or not you are Jewish, if the words of Lillian Rosengarten resonate with you, if you must say no to apartheid, occupation, checkpoints, stolen land, racism, and a desire for a Jewish state only obtained through the suffering and blood of Palestinians, then please join Jewish Voice for Peace.